What's up, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, everything in between? Welcome back to an episode of Epiphany Poker Hands. I have the sickest hand. When I saw it, I was like, I need to go over this. It's so cool. The context is huge. The balls are huge of the player that does the big move, and it's intellectually interesting. It's meeting GTO player, very well structured theoretical player of Stephen Chidwick versus two less GTO players, Bryn Kenny and Sam Trickett. Now, I feel like I have quite a unique perspective into these kind of things. Not only do I play the high rollers, but I speak a lot of hands with GTO-oriented players. I understand quite a lot of where they're coming from, although I haven't bothered learning all of the nooks and crannies, because whilst live tales still exist, you just don't need to. Bryn Kenny, I know he plays very exploitative. He has never touched a solver in his life, self-proclaimed, and he's more in the fuck GTO camp as well, I think. And Sam Trickett, who is also in that camp, he's not a regular of the high rollers anymore, but he's definitely got some tricks up his sleeve. I've seen him make some live reads. I see what people are looking for, and he's definitely looking for live reads when he's playing. So, Chidwick, it starts with 3,000, 6,000. Chidwick opens up the hijack to 13,000 chips with Jack-8 suited, which is a very standard play. Trickett then has a decision in the small blind with Ace-Jack off. Now, what do you do with Ace-Jack here? You can flat, you can 3-bet, or you can fold. Folding is probably a bit too tight, so I would lean more towards flatting or 3-betting. And in this specific situation, because the players are segregated, the businessmen, which constitute half of the tournament, and the professionals, who constitute half of the tournament, are completely segregated, I think for the first X amount of levels, maybe the first day, something along those lines. And at this point in the tournament, I've spoken to Chidwick, it was very close to reassembling the tables and reintegrating the players. So this is some tournament strategy you won't usually hear many other places, but often in tournaments, if you have a larger edge over the field, especially if you have a very tough table, you want to be playing real snug. Because yes, you do want to be taking the good spots, but maybe you don't want to be taking the marginal spots, because if you wait two levels and your table breaks and then you get to go back into the field, maybe an array of great spots are going to come up. And this is just one out of many tournament dynamics that I think a lot of people tend not to teach new players. They tend to just play it hand by hand, or learn ICM as a concept, but they don't get into the nitty gritty of chip preservation, stack preservation, and playing tighter versus some people because they're good, playing real loose against some people because they're bad, things like that. And that actually then expands even further if you have live reads against someone. Like, you can start defending super wide, like 7 deuce off kind of wide, if you have really good reads on someone, because you know you're going to get your check raises through on the flop, because you know when they've hit and you know when they don't. Whereas if you don't have very good reads, and you do have reads on other people in the table, you might want to start making really tight folds in the big blind, maybe folding some ace-5 offs, big blind versus mid position, just because you can have better spots versus the rest of the table. Anyway, Trickett decides to flat out small blind. I like the play, and Kenny comes along in the big blind with 8-6 off. Definitely pretty standard. You'd much rather have 8-6 off than king-6 off here, just so you know. You're less likely to be dominated, although he is dominated in this situation, obviously. And because Chidwick only raised to 13,000 pre-flop, it's a pretty standard call. So the flop is 7-4-3, 3 clubs. It looks like a huge cooler flop. Trickett has top pair and the nut flush draw. Kenny has a gut shot and a straight flush draw, and Chidwick has flopped a flush, the third nut flush, or fourth if you count the straight flush. Pretty huge. And of course it goes check, check, check. So let's go into this. Trickett is going to be checking 100% of his range, I'm sure. Kenny could definitely come up with some leads, especially if the board had been 7-4-3 2 clubs. He can lead a lot more, because then his 2 pairs, his sets, and his straights, which he has more of, start becoming more valuable. And when I say he has more of, I mean a larger proportion of his range is 2 pair sets and straights in comparison to everyone else, because he can have 7-4 suited, 7-3 suited, 5-6 off, which is a pretty huge one. But because it's 3 clubs, he might not decide to create a leading range. Chidwick with the third nut flush, or fourth nut flush if you count the straight flush, also decides to check, and that's a very interesting decision. Now, I've actually reached out to Chidwick and I said, hey, I'm gonna do a review on this hand. I want to do some journalistic research and see what was going on in your minds. Of course, he doesn't want to give away his whole strategy. He actually said in this spot he was going to be checking a very low frequency. Obviously, he's got a pretty strong hand and something that is vulnerable to if someone has the ace, king, or queen of clubs, especially. But he does decide to check back. My guess would be that he randomized at a low frequency, maybe 10%, something along those lines, and it came out like that. The turn is a jack, and Trickett has checked again. Kenny has checked again. Both of these decisions could go the other way. Trickett, I like his hand to check more than if he didn't have the ace of clubs. If he didn't have the ace of clubs, then he'd have more reason to want to protect. But he has a really nice check call hand now. With Kenny's decision to not bet, again, I think he definitely could. But it's just one of those situations where it's such a wet board, and Chidwick plays pretty tricky that just because he checked back the flop doesn't mean he has everything, as shown here. And Chidwick checks back again. Now, this is extremely interesting. Now, I'm pretty sure he would also have a very low frequency here. You'd much rather, if you're going to be checking back a flush twice, have the nut flush. So you're uncapped, especially because of that. I think the reason that he might have a slightly higher frequency here with this specific hand is because he blocks the jack of clubs. Now, why is that relevant? It's relevant. Maybe you can pause the video and just like come up with that yourself, actually. Do that, and I'll give you a couple of seconds. So the reason is, for all of you who out there guessed it correctly, congratulations, by the way. You're an extremely prudently good GTO player. And for anyone that just wanted to watch, the reason is that because he blocks the jack, then there are fewer hands that can call him on the turn. So if he does want to balance his checking back range with some flushes, he might choose the hands with the jack in because there's less stuff that can call him if he would bet. And this is some pretty high level GTO stuff, but the players do have artificial intelligence to tell them what to do, and they just kind of have to work out why and then apply the concepts in other directions. And Chidwick's especially very good at this. Now, this is where things heat up. The river is the 7 of spades. Trickett leads out for 16,000 into a pot of 45,000, so just over a third pot. Here with this sizing, I guess he's only repping like a jack. Maybe queen jack plus, jack 10 plus potentially, but pretty much, yeah, maybe just queen jack plus or king jack plus even, because the 7 comes in, and both Chidwick and Kenny can have a 7, so it's quite a strange thing. I don't know whether he would be balanced here, whether he would do this with the nut flush as well, and it's good to have some like 3 bets in there. And if he is balancing in this spot, which I'd be surprised because I don't think Trickett's the kind of person to balance too much in river spots. They're never going to come up again. If he is going to balance, doing it with the ace of clubs in his hands as a value hand, as just a jack, is probably a really good way to do it. And it also means he can get quite a few cheap bluffs in, because actually in this situation, Kenny and Chidwick have probably both of them missed quite a largish percentage of the time. This is where Bring Kenny decides to do a grin and go ham. He raises up to 102,000 chips. Actually it has a value of about £102,000, so it changes a bit based on tournament dynamics, where they're in the tournament, things like that, and the edge he has on the field and stuff. It depends how you're looking at it. But just to be clear, that is around £100,000 raise as with complete air, so it's already pretty sick. The reason he's doing this is that he definitely could have checked some value hands twice. He could have checked a flush twice to check raise the turn versus Chidwick. He could easily have a 7, and a 7 looks like it should be ahead here. Basically any 7x, like 7 deuce suited, 7-6 off, 7-5, and he might have some boats, but probably not. And this is a pretty key thing. He probably doesn't have boats because all of his sets and 2 pairs would want to be betting the turn for protection. Chidwick's now like, we got him, boys. We've trapped. I got my low frequency check back and it's paid off. So what's he gonna do? He's gonna try and call. I don't think there's too much value in raising. Kenny is pretty polarized here, and he doesn't really have too many value hands that he's going to be raising here, considering he has such a capped range in general, obviously not always. So Chidwick thinks for a while and calls, and now it's back on Trickett. What can you do here? And this is something I'm going to give you a little insight into Trickett's mind as I see it. You see him as he's picking up, considering what to do. He's going, he looks like he's really considering a call or a fold, and this is what a lot of people will do if they're quite well averse at live tells, is that they might reverse a live tell. And how is he reversing a live tell? So if you look at, say, a recreational player that has a really strong hand, what they'll often do is try and sell that they have a really weak hand. So if they're not very, they're not very deep into the rabbit hole of live tells, they might go, all right, I'm all in, And just a little live tell tidbit there. If someone is doing that, it's very, 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 very often the nuts or the second nuts or something along those lines. So what's Trickett doing here? He's actually reversing that. I don't think that the other players, especially Chidwick, will put too much weight into that, but I do think that's just a good habit that Trickett has picked up over time to just increase the chances that he gets a fold when he's going to make a play. And of course, Trickett does make the play. He goes all in, and it is the sickest thing to do this in £1 million tournament where they're about to reintegrate with the businessmen. So they're up against two very strong players and could lose all of his chips and not get a chance to play against all these other businessmen. It's so sick. It's just so sick. He needs Kenny to either be bluffing or to have a value hand like a 7 and fold, and he needs Chidwick not to re-hero call him on the river. So Kenny obviously gets out of the way, and it's down to Chidwick again. And I spoke to Chidwick, like I said, and I asked him what was going on, and he said pretty recently Sam Trickett had 4-bet folded ace-king, which in these days in the current climate is just unheard of usually. And he felt like this was a spot where Trickett could have 0 bluffs. And I don't blame him for thinking that. It's a spot where most people, 95% of players, including the high rollers, people really just don't find bluffs like this in their range. And in Chidwick's words, that's what I get for trying to be a field player, I guess. And Chidwick does make the folds, and I must say it's such a sick play. It's just such a cool hand to see, and I'm pretty sure everyone got really excited when they saw it, and I hope that I've given an insight mixing the GTO strategy of Chidwick and the exploitative intuitive strategies of Kenny and Trickett. So if you have any questions, let me know. If you have any other things, any other hands you want to break down, I'm about to be joining up with Patrick Antonius. We might do some hand analyses whilst we're in Rozvadov, which is in King's Casino in Czech Republic, hosted by Leon. Thank you, Leon. And yeah, just let me know if you have a hand for either me or Patrick or both of us, or any other questions you want us to cover, any other topics you want to cover. And be sure to check out Patrick's app called First Land of Poker. It's a social media app. I feel like it's changing the landscape of poker. That's why I feel so comfortable advertising it. I'm not sponsored or anything like that. I just think it's a really, really good piece of technology that people will be able to use well. Anyway, peace out, guys. Much love. See you.